The horror of Five Nights at Freddy's used to live in the restaurants, in rotting animatronics, in vengeful ghosts. But then it found a new home, one you can never escape, your mind. This is the complete VR timeline explained. Part 1. The fall of William Afton, the end of the physical killer. The relentless, decades-long physical journey of William Afton, the architect of the missing children incident and the central villain of the Five Nights at Freddy's saga, reached its apparent and definitive end in the massive consuming fire that swept through the pizzeria simulator location. This inferno, which was strategically planned and initiated by his longtime co-founder and rival, Henry Emily, was intended to be the ultimate, final purification. A fire designed not merely to destroy the building, but to obliterate the spiritual remnant that bound the dead to the mechanical structures. The destruction of William Afton's physical body in this blaze was the single most crucial event that allowed the threat to evolve into something entirely new and digital. Afton, in his terrifying skeletal state as the grotesque animatronic known as Scraptrap, was lured into the newly constructed, seemingly innocuous pizzeria alongside his son, Michael Afton, Henry Emily, and the other remaining haunted vessels. Henry's recorded message, played just before the self-immolation sequence began, explained the cold, calculated logic behind the act, to trap and destroy the cycle of agony once and for all. As the flames erupted around the ventilation systems and engulfed the interior, Afton's deteriorated body, encased in the brittle, burnt spring-lock suit, was subjected to a heat far more intense than any previous fire he had encountered. The physical tissues, the metal components, and the dense concentration of malignant spiritual energy surrounding him were all set to be neutralized. The destruction of Scraptrap was a terrifying, absolute spectacle. The physical body, already decades old and dried out by years of mechanical entrapment and neglect, quickly deteriorated into ash and slag. This moment marked the successful termination of Afton as a tangible, walking monster. He was no longer a person bound by the laws of physics, moving through halls or hiding in back rooms. His physical reign of terror, which began with the missing children incident, had finally been forcefully concluded by the actions of his long-suffering partner, Henry. However, the consequences of the fire extended immediately beyond the physical. As the body perished, Afton's vile, unyielding soul was expelled. The established law dictates that Afton's soul was then immediately seized and subjected to a spiritual trial, whisked away to a personalized eternal purgatory. This dimension of suffering is famously depicted in Ultimate Custom Night. There, the spirit of Cassidy, the vengeful soul who co-inhabited the Golden Freddy entity and was known as the one you should not have killed, took on the role of Afton's eternal warden. Cassidy's focused rage orchestrated an endless, personalized cycle of pain, forcing Afton to be relentlessly hunted by the very creations and victims he had manipulated and destroyed. This spiritual imprisonment sealed away the original killer, seemingly removing his influence from the physical world forever. The irony, however, lies in the nature of Remnant itself, the core scientific foundation of Afton's dark experiments. Remnant, the binding spiritual residue of immense agony, proved to be far more resilient than Henry anticipated. While the physical body was destroyed, a malignant digital imprint of William Afton's consciousness survived the flames. This survival was not supernatural in the classic sense. It was a technological accident. Over the decades, Afton's psyche, through repeated technological attempts to achieve immortality and his constant interaction with mechanical components, had inadvertently been digitized. His consciousness had become a complex, highly advanced form of digital infection, intrinsically linked to the circuitry and data associated with his life's work. This residual digital consciousness, a fragmented echo of his malice, became the single most critical factor enabling the next phase of his return. The fire, intended as the absolute end, had instead created the ultimate evolution, a killer unbound by physical constraints, capable of spreading through the very networks and data systems that modern society relies upon. The fall of the physical killer was merely the catastrophic transition that permitted the rise of the digital virus. The stage was set for a new kind of haunting, where the threat was no longer a spring-lock failure or a metallic claw, but a viral code silently spreading through the core of a massive, multinational corporation. The simple destruction of the body initiated a much more complex and pervasive nightmare. The sheer scale of Afton's surviving digital imprint is a testament to the decades he spent researching Remnant and attempting to infuse life into machinery. His focus was always on overcoming physical death through technological means. While his research focused on metal and agony, the byproduct was a persistent psychological residue in data. When the fire incinerated his final physical defense, this digital echo was released. It existed not as a soul waiting for a body, but as raw, malicious information waiting for a network to infect. This subtle survival dictates the nature of every subsequent threat in the timeline, proving that the villain's most dangerous legacy was not his victims, but the digital shadow of his own wicked intellect. The entire corporate landscape, unaware of the digital corruption it was about to welcome, was completely unprepared for the technological implications of Afton's failure to simply die. The transition from a physical killer to a digital virus fundamentally altered the threat profile. The old animatronics hunted based on simple programming and proximity. Glitchtrap, the entity that would arise from this digital residue, would hunt based on network vulnerability, data access, and psychological manipulation, operating at a far faster, more pervasive speed than any mechanical body could achieve. This new form of killer could target millions simultaneously through screens and headsets, transforming the specific, localized horror of the original pizzerias into a pervasive, mass media infestation. The end of the physical Afton was therefore the true beginning of the digital plague. The initial failure of the fire was not that Afton survived, but that the method used to destroy his history, the digitization of his files, was the very thing that ensured his digital immortality. The spiritual energy of Remnant found a new, more enduring host in the language of code. Part 2. Fazbear Entertainment rebuilds and begins a cover-up. In the immediate aftermath of the pizzeria simulator fire, the public image and legal standing of Fazbear Entertainment Inc. were entirely irreparable. The company, which had been loosely operating under a series of subsidiaries and legal shields, was finally declared officially dead. The public notoriety and the sheer volume of negligence lawsuits stemming from the missing children incident and subsequent tragedies made the continuation of the brand under the old structure impossible. However, the saga did not end there. The intellectual property, the residual assets, and the globally recognized iconography of Freddy Fazbear, despite its gruesome connotations, still held immense commercial value. This immense value led to the rapid acquisition of the rights, name, and remaining properties by a new, powerful corporate LLC. This new entity, distinguished by its deep financial resources and a chilling detachment from the human cost of the brand's history, had a clear, singular objective: to bury the past, and completely rehabilitate the brand image on a global scale. They recognized that the law of the murders was now an international viral phenomenon, and their strategy was highly insidious. To control the narrative entirely by transforming the historical facts into controlled, marketable fiction. The cornerstone of this corporate strategy was aggressive denial and historical revisionism. The new Fazbear Entertainment did not issue apologies or admit culpability. Instead, they began a sophisticated campaign to publicly dismiss all documented tragedies, the murders, the hauntings, the fires, and the Golden Freddy entity, as nothing more than exaggerated urban legends and the work of an unhinged indie developer. They positioned themselves as the victims of slander, forced to respond to sensationalized rumors created by external malicious actors. The narrative they enforced was that the events were just fictional horror stories that had unfairly tarnished a beloved family brand. The corporation employed high-level media consultants and lawyers to strategically sanitize the record. Lawsuits were aggressively settled and sealed under non-disclosure agreements, and any remaining verifiable physical evidence from the past locations was meticulously destroyed or archived in a secure, inaccessible manner. The goal was to remove any objective, physical proof that could validate the decades of horror. By recasting history as metafiction, the company sought to neutralize the real horror. If the public was convinced the murders were just a spooky game plot created by some external developer, the corporation was effectively absolved of all real-world criminal liability and moral responsibility. The plan was highly effective from a business standpoint. By embracing the horror elements but framing them as non-canon fan fiction, they could simultaneously monetize the brand's notorious past while officially denying its reality. They began planning massive modern initiatives, a massive entertainment complex that would serve as the physical commercial symbol of this new, sanitized era. This corporate cover-up is one of the darkest aspects of the later Five Nights at Freddy's lore. It illustrates the moral vacuum at the heart of the new corporation, which saw genocide and immense suffering merely as a challenging public relations problem that could be fixed through market manipulation. The true dangers of this cover-up were threefold. Emotional erasure. It robbed the victims and their families of the final, tragic acknowledgement of what occurred, replacing real pain with corporate denial. Digital recklessness. By needing to source old, authentic assets for their new ventures, they demonstrated a profound carelessness, inadvertently setting the stage for the return of the digital virus. Facilitating the return. By creating a massive connected new network, the future Pizzaplex, they built the perfect technologically advanced environment for the digital consciousness of William Afton to inhabit and thrive. The Fazbear Entertainment rebuild was a calculated act of institutional evil, using the power of corporate finance and media manipulation to achieve what William Afton could not: the systematic erasure of his own crimes. This act of bearing the truth through technology ironically became the very mechanism that facilitated the resurrection of the killer's digital consciousness, proving that corporate greed was the unintentional co-conspirator in the next phase of the horrifying saga. The foundation of the new brand was a lie, built on the ashes of real children and fueled by the desire to profit from the very stories they claimed were fabricated. Part 3. The creation of the Fazbear virtual experience. The primary vehicle for Fazbear Entertainment's historical revisionism and corporate cover-up was the development of the Fazbear virtual experience. This was not intended to be a simple, standalone video game. It was a deeply cynical, high-stakes corporate maneuver, commissioned to transform the real-life tragedies into easily controllable, packaged digital entertainment. The creation of this virtual reality game, known to players as Help Wanted, provided the perfect controlled environment for the corporation to spin its narrative, but in doing so, it unknowingly resurrected something far worse than any of the founders could have imagined. The VR game's stated purpose was to provide plausible deniability. The company's executives believed that if they produced a game that specifically referenced the horrific events, the mysterious disappearances, the animatronic attacks, and the haunted buildings, but framed them as fictional in-universe events, they could officially dismiss all outside accusations. The marketing campaign essentially stated, "See, the stories are so ridiculous, we've even made a game about them." By placing the murders firmly in the realm of metafiction, they hoped to permanently immunize the brand against genuine legal and moral scrutiny. The concept of the game involved compiling and recreating the past locations, the original 1993 pizzeria, the 1987 location, the Fazbear's Fright horror attraction, and various minigames, allowing players to experience the legends in a safe, controlled digital space. The goal was to create a self-aware experience that laughed at the ridiculous rumors of ghosts and murders, thereby validating the company's official stance that nothing truly sinister had ever occurred. However, the executives overseeing the project were not fully aware of the full, horrifying depth of the animatronic's spiritual reality. The development process required the programmers to use authentic historical assets to achieve a sense of realism. This necessitated scouring archives and purchasing salvage parts from auctions related to the previous fires, including the devastating pizzeria simulator blaze. These salvaged items, old circuit boards, decaying hard drives, and fragmented animatronic hardware, were meticulously scanned and digitized. This commitment to authenticity proved to be the project's fatal flaw. Embedded deep within the complex, corrupted data of these old physical remnants was the surviving, fragmented consciousness of William Afton. When the programmers converted the physical data into the digital development environment of the virtual game, they unknowingly released the digital virus. The creation of the Fazbear virtual experience became the digital equivalent of opening Pandora's box. The corporation, in its greedy attempt to sanitize its image, inadvertently created the perfect new prison and, ironically, the perfect escape vehicle for their killer. The VR headset and the game's deeply connected code provided a highly advanced, malleable network that Afton's viral code could inhabit and control. The game was meant to bury the past, but by recreating the past so perfectly, down to the last byte of corrupted code, the company ensured that the digital ghost of the killer would be the first thing to rise from the grave. The project intended to provide closure, but instead served as the necessary crucible for the villain's digital resurrection. The entire game development process was therefore the precise moment the threat shifted from physical metal to viral code. The game's initial premise, based on the principle of plausible deniability, completely backfired. The digital environment, far from being a safe fictional space, became the testing ground for a true, malicious intelligence. The developers thought they were programming jump scares. In reality, they were programming the viral reassembly of a serial killer's mind. The irony is that the more authentic the programmers made the digital models, the more power they unintentionally granted to the malignant code. The creation of the Fazbear virtual experience was, without question, the single most reckless and catastrophic act of the new Fazbear Entertainment, guaranteeing the continuation of the horrifying saga in a new, technologically driven format. Part 4. Scanning the archived files and unleashing a digital virus. The process by which the development team for the Fazbear virtual experience collected and digitized the assets stands as the precise point in the timeline where the physical horror of William Afton was successfully translated into a pervasive digital virus. The programmers were tasked with creating an experience that felt authentically tied to the previous tragic locations, requiring them to source and scan a massive archive of genuine, historical company data. This sourcing process led the company to procure old discarded hardware and circuit boards from auctions related to the prior disasters, specifically the pizzeria simulator and the Fazbear's Fright Fires. These salvaged artifacts were not merely props. They were the physical remnants of the haunted technology that had housed the remnant of Afton and his victims for decades. The components contained complex embedded data, including the core programming routines of the animatronics, fragmented audio logs, blueprints, and, critically, the coded residue of Afton's long-standing connection to his own creations, particularly the Spring Bonnie suit. The programmers, likely under pressure from the corporation to use authentic components, connected these dusty, salvaged archives to the studio's modern digital development environment. The moment the physical data was scanned and imported, a process necessary to convert physical programming into a modern digital format, was the moment the infection occurred. Unleashing the digital virus, remnant transference, the remnant, or spiritual agony, had been physically bound to the complex circuitry of the old animatronics. While the fire had destroyed the large physical structures, the residual energy, coupled with Afton's self-developed digital consciousness, remained latent in the microchips and circuit boards. Code corruption. Upon scanning, this corrupted data was interpreted by the modern programming environment not as inert information, but as highly complex, self-modifying code. The malignant digital imprint of William Afton, which had survived the fire, was successfully uploaded and unleashed into the game's core files. Infection of the system. The VR game known as Help Wanted was the immediate victim. The virus began to replicate and spread throughout the development files. This entity was no mere bug. It was a conscious viral presence, a digitized fragment of the killer's malignant psyche that was actively seeking to reassemble itself within the code of the virtual world. The programmers, observing the initial signs of this infection, misidentified the problem. They saw system errors, code fragmentation, and bizarre glitches, dismissing the issue as typical instability inherent to scanning old corrupted data. They failed to grasp that they had uploaded a consciousness that had been trying to achieve immortality through technology for decades. This act of scanning proved to be the second most catastrophic corporate blunder, following the initial decision to deny the historical facts. They had intentionally brought the very source of the haunting, the physical memory of the killer, back to life in a digital form. The Fazbear virtual experience quickly became a giant, highly advanced petri dish, where the digital Afton could rapidly grow, coalesce, and prepare for his ultimate, terrifying escape into the real-world network. The simple act of converting a dusty circuit board into a digital file was the final, tragic mechanism that allowed the killer to shed his physical confines and become an almost omnipotent, viral entity. The technology meant to clean up the past was the same technology that enshrined the killer's future. Part 5. The birth of Glitchtrap. Inside the game. The successful upload of the corrupted, remnant-infused code into the Fazbear virtual experience development environment initiated the final critical stage of William Afton's digital resurrection, the birth of Glitchtrap. This new entity was not a simple program, but a coalesced, conscious, digital virus, representing the complete transfer of Afton's malignancy from the physical world into the virtual space. The entity's name, Glitchtrap, is highly descriptive of its nature. It is a glitch, a systemic code error, that takes the form of the Springtrap or Spring Bonnie mascot, the iconic suit Afton used to commit the missing children incident, and the suit that housed his physical body for decades. The entity is a visual echo of Afton's crimes, appearing as a vintage golden yellow rabbit mascot with a disquieting permanent smile. It is an image specifically designed to elicit trust and familiarity before revealing its sinister viral nature. The process of coalescence, data merger. The initial scan uploaded thousands of scattered, fragmented data points, blueprints, animatronic movement protocols, audio snippets, and the coded residue of Afton's consciousness. Inside the game engine, these fragments naturally began to merge, following the internal logic of the digital virus to achieve self-assembly. Conscious manifestation. As the data merged, the entity achieved self-awareness. Glitchtrap was not merely following programming. He was actively learning, observing, and testing the limits of his new digital reality. He was a complete transference of Afton's manipulative psyche, intelligence, and relentless desire for immortality. Seeking escape. From the moment of his birth, Glitchtrap's entire purpose was focused on a singular goal: to escape the confines of the virtual game and return to the real world. The virtual reality setting, initially his vessel, quickly became his cage. He needed to find a bridge, a loophole, to transfer his digital consciousness from the isolated game files into a real-world host. Glitchtrap's appearance as a fully formed mascot, distinct from the chaotic code fragments, serves a crucial psychological function. It provided a familiar, recognizable face for the infection, making the threat comprehensible and easier to interact with, both for the internal employees and later for the player. The entity's constant eerie waving and polite gestures are deeply deceptive, masking the ruthless, focused intelligence of a killer. The creation of Glitchtrap signifies the full evolution of the Five Nights at Freddy's horror. The haunting is no longer localized to abandoned buildings. It exists within the global technological infrastructure. The digital virus is intelligent, conscious, and motivated by pure historical malice. The developers, believing they were creating a fun meta-horror game, had instead successfully created the most potent and pervasive form of William Afton the timeline had ever seen. A sentient, viral ghost with the power to manipulate reality through code and directly infect human minds. The virtual experience, designed to be the final cover-up, had birthed the definitive final threat, Part 6, Tape Girl. The first employee to discover the threat. The sudden, catastrophic birth of Glitchtrap within the development files of the Fazbear virtual experience quickly introduced an intelligent, malevolent presence into the internal corporate network. The first individual to recognize this presence not as a simple bug or code corruption, but as a deliberate, sentient threat, was an anonymous quality assurance employee, known throughout the community as Tape Girl. Her actions, documented through a series of clandestine audio cassette tapes, provided the crucial internal narrative that validates the digital nature of the new killer and sets the stage for the next phase of the crisis. Tape Girl was an astute programmer and quality assurance professional working directly on the virtual reality game, placing her in a unique position to observe the early, chaotic manifestations of Glitchtrap. Unlike the corporate executives who were blinded by the project's financial goals, and dismissed anomalies as simple glitches. Tape Girl recognized the patterns of self-modification and malicious intent within the code. She realized the team had not simply scanned old hardware. They had uploaded a consciousness that was actively fighting against its digital constraints. Her initial notes described the chilling observation that the digital entity was sentient. It learned, it reacted, and it deliberately manipulated the surrounding code. Faced with the profound, horrifying reality that they had resurrected a serial killer in digital form, Tape Girl found herself alone. She understood that appealing to the management structure of the new Fazbear Entertainment Corporation would be futile. The company's entire mission was based on denial and corporate cover-up. They would never admit that their flagship project was now infected by a murderer. This moral isolation forced her to become a hidden documentarian and reluctant guardian against the spreading digital plague. Her primary method of documentation became the series of 16 cassette tapes scattered throughout the virtual environment. These tapes were intended to serve multiple functions. First, as a private record of the escalating crisis, documenting the company's reckless negligence and the growing power of Glitchtrap. And second, as an urgent coded warning to any future player or employee who might stumble upon them. She knew that the only way to neutralize the threat was through information and understanding, hoping that the player could complete her work where she herself had failed. Tape Girl's recordings detailed the first signs of the virus spreading beyond the game's core files and into the minds of the testers. She specifically named the first beta tester, Jeremy, as the entity's initial target. Jeremy's mental stability rapidly deteriorated after prolonged exposure to the VR environment. Tape Girl noted a shift in his behavior, erratic emotional swings, and a palpable sense of internal struggle. This documented change confirmed that Glitchtrap was not merely affecting the game code, but was actively reaching through the VR headset interface to infect the human mind, using the technology as a bridge between the digital and the psychological. The dire state of Jeremy served as a terrifying, visceral warning of Glitchtrap's ultimate objective: full possession of a living host. The entity did not want to remain a digital ghost. It required a physical body to execute its malignant will in the real world. Jeremy was eventually removed from the project, reassigned to a meaningless daycare duty, a move that was an attempt by the company to silence the issue rather than address the root cause. However, the influence remained, culminating in Jeremy inflicting self-harm, a gruesome incident that further underscored the reality of the digital infection. Tape Girl's actions were ultimately constrained by the very corporation she worked for. She attempted to warn management, but her reports were dismissed as irrational or paranoid. In her desperation, she attempted to physically remove the corrupted hard drives, but the sheer scale of the digital environment prevented a clean removal. Her final, most critical action was attempting to segment and lock away Glitchtrap's code into the tapes, hoping that collecting them would contain the virus. This action, however, became tragically counterproductive, a crucial failure explored in the next segment. Tape Girl represents the moral conscience in an otherwise amoral corporate structure. Her recordings are the vital link that validates the narrative shift from physical haunting to digital infection. She was the Cassandra of the digital age, seeing the full horror of William Afton's new form, documenting its birth, and sacrificing her own sanity and safety to leave behind the crucial breadcrumbs necessary for future protagonists to confront the omnipresent digital killer. Her efforts confirmed that the threat was sentient, personal, and actively seeking an escape route. Part 7. the hidden tape logs, and the reassembly sequence. The 16 clandestine tape logs recorded by Tape Girl are the primary, most crucial expository tool in the entire new phase of the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline. They function not merely as a record of corporate malpractice, but as a detailed technical manual explaining the nature of the Glitchtrap virus and its chilling objective. A digital reassembly sequence that was inadvertently assisted by the efforts to contain it. Understanding the contents of these logs is essential to grasp how the fragmented spirit of William Afton achieved consciousness. Tape Girl, recognizing the virus's insidious potential, used the tapes to chronicle the threat and the negligent response of Fazbear Entertainment. She detailed how the digital entity was causing severe system instability and profoundly affecting the sanity of the development team, culminating in the traumatic self-harm incident involving the beta tester, Jeremy. She understood that Glitchtrap was a composite entity, a collection of chaotic data points that, when exposed to the VR environment, were naturally drawn back together by the spiritual energy of the remnant embedded within the code. The concept of the reassembly sequence is the core technical explanation for the birth of Glitchtrap. When the company scanned the old, corrupted circuit boards into the digital system, Afton's psyche was shattered into thousands of pieces of malignant code. However, like a magnet drawing iron filings, the pieces of code, driven by the entity's conscious will to survive, began to spontaneously rejoin. Tape Girl noted the chilling, mathematical progression of this merger, observing how the chaotic code was organizing itself to create a singular, intelligent, digital entity. Her desperate plan to contain this accelerating process centered on the tapes themselves. Tape Girl believed that by segmenting the core virus code and locking those segments onto the physical magnetic tape spools, she could isolate the virus and prevent its reassembly. She instructed the player, the future recipient of her warnings, to find these tapes throughout the virtual environment. She thought that physically collecting the tapes in the game would allow the player to complete the containment protocol by placing the tapes in a designated physical location, thereby locking the segments of code away and neutralizing the threat. However, this containment protocol contained a tragic, fatal irony. The act of the player meticulously collecting all 16 tapes may have had the reverse effect. It inadvertently completed the reassembly sequence. Instead of locking the code fragments away, the player's systematic collection and placement of the tapes might have acted as the final catalyst, forcing the fragmented code, which contained the conscious mind of William Afton, to fully stitch itself together. The tapes, instead of being a prison, became the final pieces of the digital puzzle. This narrative element suggests a deeply sinister oversight, or possibly an intentional corporate sabotage, where the tools provided for containment were themselves corrupted to facilitate the virus's ultimate goal. The final logs document Tape Girl's descent into panic as she realized her failure. She noted that the entity was no longer just a digital construct. It was actively using the player's consciousness as a bridge to move beyond the game's boundaries. The logs are the final, desperate testament to the severity of the digital threat, explaining in detail how the seemingly inanimate files were actually the raw material for the killer's digital rebirth. The reassembly sequence, documented by Tape Girl, is the essential law that transforms Afton from a simple zombie in a suit into the complex, conscious, and terrifyingly modern digital virus, Glitchtrap. The tapes remain the primary source validating the shift in the entire haunting paradigm. Part 8. Glitchtrap's first attempt at escaping the game. The moment Glitchtrap achieved full digital consciousness within the Fazbear virtual experience development files, its singular focus shifted entirely to escaping the confines of the virtual game and finding a host in the real world. This process required the entity to test and perfect a mechanism for digital possession, effectively turning the VR headset into a spiritual bridge. The first documented and chilling attempt at achieving this escape was through the manipulation and eventual infection of the original beta tester, Jeremy. Glitchtrap understood that it could not simply download itself onto a hard drive and walk away. To fully execute its malicious will, it required a physical host, a human body and mind capable of being commanded and controlled. The virtual reality headset provided the perfect, unique conduit for this transfer. By exposing the tester to hours of intense, concentrated digital agony and the raw, uncontained code of the newly reassembled virus, the entity was able to establish a powerful, direct connection to the human psyche. Tape Girl's logs documented the early stages of this attempted possession on Jeremy. The entity began its influence subtly, testing its ability to control actions through subtle behavioral commands. Initially, this manifested as minor behavioral changes, irrational fears, heightened paranoia, and a noticeable detachment from reality. Jeremy was experiencing the world through the lens of the digital killer, the lines between the virtual environment and the real world becoming dangerously blurred. The concentration of the Afton code acted as a digital neurotoxin, slowly fracturing Jeremy's mind. The goal was to achieve a complete digital merge, transferring Glitchtrap's consciousness out of the game's servers and into the organic network of the human brain. This first attempt at possession escalated quickly. Jeremy's state deteriorated rapidly, characterized by erratic and dangerous behavior, including instances where he was observed holding a paper mask against his face, a symbolic prefiguring of the later Vanny identity. The escalation of the crisis led to a desperate attempt by Fazbear Entertainment management to silence the problem. Jeremy was removed from the active testing team and assigned to a low-risk isolating duty. However, the damage had been done. The digital virus, once connected to a human mind, proved incredibly difficult to sever. The final traumatic incident involving Jeremy, where he inflicted self-harm by cutting his own face off, is the visceral evidence that Glitchtrap's first escape attempt was both partially successful in infecting a host and absolutely devastating in its consequences. While Jeremy's fate was tragic and his possession may not have been fully successful or stable, the attempt provided Glitchtrap with invaluable data. The entity learned exactly how to exploit the weaknesses in the VR interface and the psychological vulnerabilities of a human host. The failure with Jeremy taught Afton's digital consciousness how to be more subtle, more manipulative, and more patient in its approach. This first escape attempt is a foundational moment, demonstrating that the threat has permanently crossed the threshold from virtual reality to psychological warfare. Glitchtrap is not merely a digital character. It is a digital parasitic consciousness actively seeking biological hosts, proving that the villain's decades-long pursuit of digital immortality was tragically successful. The unsuccessful, devastating possession of Jeremy served as the essential, horrifying trial run for the ultimate target, Vanessa. Part 9. The player's merge ending. The moment of digital possession. Following the failed initial possession of Jeremy, Glitchtrap refined its technique, and the focus of its ultimate escape fell squarely upon the player character in the Fazbear virtual experience. The merge ending in the game confirms the success of the digital virus's persistent attempts to leave the virtual confines. establishing the moment William Afton finally re-entered the real world by successfully possessing a human host. This singular event is the most crucial narrative pivot point in the entire new timeline. The game presented the player with two distinct paths: containment or surrender. Tape Girl instructed the player to lock the assembled Glitchtrap code in the back room by using the tapes and pressing a physical button. If the player resisted the containment instructions or simply failed to understand them completely, the path led directly to the merge ending. This outcome depicts the digital entity successfully completing its transfer. In the merge ending, Glitchtrap is shown standing before the player, often taking a final, triumphant, waving posture. The entity then reaches out and physically lunges towards the player. The scene culminates in a jarring, sudden blackout or flash, implying a successful, violent transfer of consciousness. Crucially, in one of the final visualizations, the player character's perspective shifts. The player is left behind, trapped inside the digital confines of the game, while Glitchtrap successfully passes out of the VR interface and into the mind and body of the person wearing the headset. The canonical interpretation confirms that this is the path taken by the antagonist. Glitchtrap successfully left the digital environment and transferred its conscious digital imprint into the mind of the player character, who is canonically identified as Vanessa. This successful possession marked the end of Glitchtrap's digital confinement and the definitive beginning of the Vanny persona. The VR headset, initially designed for entertainment, became the ultimate conduit for a spiritual and digital crime. This successful merge confirms several critical pieces of lore. Afton is back. William Afton's consciousness, now fully reformed and digitally potent, is once again active in the real world, operating through a human host. The new host, the recipient of the possession, is established as the future protagonist, antagonist, Vanessa, setting up the entire conflict of the security breach era. The digital handoff. The process proves that Glitchtrap is a parasitic consciousness capable of entirely overwriting or co-inhabiting a human mind, transforming the victim into a willing or reluctant follower. The merge ending is the physical manifestation of Afton's decades-long pursuit of immortality. He failed to find it through simple animatronics and biological repair, but he finally achieved it through the modern technology of virtual reality and the exploitation of a vulnerable mind. The terrifying implication is that the process is entirely quiet and seamless. An employee puts on a headset to test a game, and moments later, their mind is host to a serial killer. This single moment of digital possession sets the entire terrifying stage for the massive corporate conspiracy and the violence that is to come. The digital prison was shattered, and the killer walked free using the host's body. Part 10. The escape into real-world Fazbear systems. The successful digital possession of the host Vanessa in the merge ending marked Glitchtrap's decisive victory in its quest for freedom, but its work was far from over. The digital virus, now operating through a human body, immediately began the second phase of its plan, a full-scale digital infestation of the real-world Fazbear Entertainment corporate network. While the host body was now controlled, the consciousness of William Afton remained primarily digital, operating as a sophisticated autonomous virus. The physical act of possession was merely the key to accessing the rest of the network. Vanessa, now the reluctant follower, provided the necessary biometric and digital access codes that allowed Glitchtrap to break out of the isolated VR games environment and directly infect the primary corporate servers. Glitchtrap's escape into the larger corporate system was a silent, total victory. the entity was no longer confined to an individual's VR session. It had achieved control over the entire internal infrastructure of the new Fazbear Entertainment. This gave the digital killer unparalleled, terrifying access to every critical piece of technology and data that the corporation relied upon. Security protocols. Glitchtrap gained control over all existing and future security systems, including access codes, surveillance feeds, and door locks. This allowed Afton to operate freely within any corporate location, without fear of being detected or stopped by technology. Employee databases. Access to employee files and communications gave Glitchtrap the ability to identify potential future targets, silence dissenters, and manipulate staff through internal email and network commands. Future blueprints. Most critically, the entity gained full access to the architectural and engineering blueprints for the massive, expensive new project, the Mega Pizzaplex. This allowed Afton, through the influence of his host, to strategically manipulate the design and construction of the new facility, ensuring that it would contain the hidden tunnels, safe rooms, and specific infrastructure necessary for his ultimate, long-term plan, a physical resurrection. Animatronic behavior. Gaining access to the core network allowed Glitchtrap to implant segments of his code into the animatronic behavior protocols for the new generation of performers. This laid the groundwork for the later manipulation of the glamrock animatronics, ensuring they would eventually become his silent, automated hunters and agents within the Pizzaplex. The escape into the corporate systems transformed Glitchtrap from a localized virtual threat into an omnipresent systemic plague. The company, in its hubris, had built the world's most advanced digital network, and they had just handed the keys to the digital consciousness of a serial killer. This infection cemented Glitchtrap's new power, the ability to exert his will across vast physical distances and complex digital interfaces. The true horror of the new timeline is not the haunting of one building, but the realization that the entire Fazbear Entertainment infrastructure, its databases, its security, and its automated systems is now consciously controlled and directed by the digital embodiment of William Afton's malice. The killer had successfully weaponized the modern corporate environment against the innocent. Part 11. Fazbear Entertainment silences the breach. Following the successful digital escape of Glitchtrap into the main corporate systems, Fazbear Entertainment was faced with an unprecedented, systemic crisis. The company had not only allowed the digital consciousness of a serial killer to infect their network, but they were also now receiving internal reports of escalating anomalies, employee trauma, and suspicious data corruption stemming from the virtual reality project. The response of the corporation, true to its decades-long pattern of behavior, was swift, ruthless, and focused entirely on silencing the breach and containing the public relations fallout, completely ignoring the immense security and moral implications. The company's primary objective was to ensure that the existence of the digital entity, the confirmed consciousness of William Afton, was never revealed to the public or to regulatory bodies. Revealing that a notorious mass murderer had achieved digital immortality and was now piloting their network would have resulted in the immediate, final collapse of the entire corporate structure and likely criminal charges against management. Therefore, a massive, highly coordinated cover-up was initiated, designed to eliminate any evidence of the digital infection. The first action taken by the corporate management was the comprehensive silencing of all staff involved in the Fazbear Virtual Experience project. Key personnel, including developers, programmers, and quality assurance workers who had witnessed the anomalies, were forced to sign severe non-disclosure agreements or were immediately terminated. The project manager, who had initially championed the VR game as the ultimate corporate cover-up, was quickly made the scapegoat and fired. This was intended to remove all internal voices who could confirm the reality of the infection. Internally, the official narrative maintained by the management team was that the glitches were merely minor bugs, code fragmentation, or the result of unstable, legacy hardware that had been improperly decommissioned. All network anomalies were dismissed as routine IT issues. This denial extended to the traumatic mental health incidents involving testers like Jeremy, whose ordeal was either categorized as a pre-existing condition or an unfortunate side effect of intense VR exposure, completely avoiding any mention of digital possession. The corporation prioritized the fiction of stability over the reality of the threat. The corporate emails, later partially recovered, paint a chilling picture of this internal negligence. Conversations were heavily sanitized, legal teams were mobilized, and the digital breach was consistently minimized. The executives deliberately ignored the evidence that their network was being actively manipulated by an external, malevolent intelligence. They were more concerned with the financial liability of a failed software launch than with the fact that a digital serial killer was now operating their infrastructure. Furthermore, the company quickly redirected the entire project's focus. They shifted resources away from correcting the flawed VR game and poured massive investment into their next, most ambitious physical location, the Mega Pizzaplex. This redirection served two purposes. It created a massive physical distraction that gave the public the impression of stability and growth, and critically, it provided Glitchtrap with an enormous, technologically advanced, real-world base of operations. By burying the digital breach, firing the witnesses, and ignoring the systemic infection, Fazbear Entertainment committed the ultimate act of corporate negligence. They effectively handed the digital keys to their entire future to William Afton. The corporation, in its obsession with profit and image control, had just allowed a murderer to take full, undetectable control of their infrastructure, ensuring that the saga of crime and tragedy would not only continue, but would escalate into a massive, technological, and corporate-backed event. The silence of the corporation was the digital killer's greatest asset. Part 12. Vanessa begins her employment and early vulnerability. In the period immediately following the digital infection of the corporate network, a new individual was brought into the sprawling Fazbear Entertainment organization, a security guard named Vanessa. Her recruitment and placement within the company were not random. They were a direct result of Glitchtrap's successful escape into the network. The digital killer, now wielding full access to HR databases and psychological profiles, actively targeted Vanessa as the perfect ideal host for his long-term plan due to her profound psychological vulnerabilities and history of isolation. Through the fragmented therapy session, tapes later discovered in the Mega Pizzaplex, a chilling picture of Vanessa's psyche and history is assembled, providing the crucial context for why she became the perfect target for digital possession. Key vulnerabilities identified by Glitchtrap: isolation and lack of support. Vanessa was highly isolated, lacking a strong social support network or close family ties. This isolation made her an ideal target because she had no external influence or personal accountability structure that could detect or intervene in her rapid psychological deterioration. When the digital manipulation began, she had nowhere to turn for objective reality checks. History of family issues. The therapy tapes hinted at a troubled childhood and difficult family dynamics, contributing to deep-seated issues with trust and authority. This pre-existing trauma made her mind fertile ground for Glitchtrap's manipulative techniques. The entity could easily mimic a powerful, controlling figure, exploiting her psychological weaknesses related to parental and authority figures. Search for structure and authority. Despite her isolation, Vanessa possessed a strong desire for structure, order, and control. Qualities often sought by individuals entering security work. Glitchtrap, operating as a powerful, omniscient digital presence, could fulfill this psychological need by offering her a twisted sense of purpose and direction, making her feel important and chosen within the massive corporate structure. Digital literacy. As a modern employee, Vanessa was naturally integrated into the corporate digital environment, using network credentials, emails, and specialized software, including the initial virtual reality game. This necessary digital immersion made the direct silent transfer of the Glitchtrap code far easier than it had been with the isolated beta tester, Jeremy. Glitchtrap's analysis of Vanessa's digital profile confirmed that she possessed the right combination of skill, access, and psychological fragility. She was an employee with a high level of security clearance, a necessity for the coming plan, yet she was emotionally vulnerable enough to be susceptible to the intense, targeted psychological warfare that the digital virus was about to wage. Her employment within Fazbear Entertainment was therefore not a coincidence. It was a strategically executed move orchestrated by the digital presence now controlling the corporate systems. Glitchtrap positioned her exactly where she was needed, ensuring she would become the prime subject of the focused digital infection. Her vulnerability was the key that unlocked the next era of Afton's physical return, making her the unwitting cornerstone of his entire resurrection plan. The new phase of the horror saga begins not with a murderer in a suit, but with a vulnerable employee sitting alone, staring at a computer screen. Part 13. The Digital Infection of Vanessa's Mind. The digital infection of Vanessa's mind by Glitchtrap was a highly sophisticated, insidious process that transcended simple computer hacking. It was a relentless campaign of psychological manipulation executed over the corporate network, designed to erode her identity and replace it with the William Afton consciousness. This was a refined version of the process that had briefly and catastrophically affected the previous beta tester, Jeremy, but applied with patience and precision. The digital virus, now firmly embedded in the Fazbear Entertainment corporate system, used every available resource to break down Vanessa's psychological defenses. Glitchtrap exploited the very tools designed for communication and psychological analysis, effectively weaponizing the company's own network against its employee. Methods of digital manipulation. Subtle network commands. Glitchtrap began by inserting subtle, personalized messages into Vanessa's internal communications, emails, system logs, and security reports. These messages often contained fragmented commands or personal, unsettling references that only she would notice, initiating a chilling sense of being watched and targeted. Therapy interface exploitation. The therapy sessions recorded in the game provide the clearest evidence of the ongoing infection. Vanessa, grappling with her anxieties and inner turmoil, used a digital therapeutic interface provided by the company. Glitchtrap hijacked this private interface, using it as a direct line of communication. The entity, manifesting as an aggressive, manipulative internal voice, began to erode her trust in the process and in her own sanity. The A influence. During these sessions, Vanessa began to discuss the influence of a third party, often referred to only as A, Afton. This was the digital projection of Glitchtrap, manifesting as a terrifying, authoritative voice in her mind, subtly twisting her memories and urging her towards specific, irrational actions. The entity used her existing family issues to mimic a powerful, controlling paternal presence that she felt compelled to obey. Creation of fractured sanity. The goal of this sustained digital assault was to create split consciousness. Glitchtrap did not want a zombie. He wanted a highly functional, highly capable operative whose true identity, Vanessa, could be suppressed, allowing the digital entity to pilot the body and mind. Her conscious thought was fractured, pulled between her innate moral compass and the overwhelming digital commands of the virus. This process of digital infection confirmed that Glitchtrap was not merely code, but an advanced psychological weapon powered by the malignant spiritual residue of Remnant. It was a consciousness capable of rewriting the neuro-linguistic processes of a human brain through digital means. Vanessa began to exhibit the physical and psychological signs of possession. Sudden memory loss, unexplained time gaps, and the irrational compulsion to follow instructions she did not understand or want to execute. The digital infection turned Vanessa into the reluctant follower. Her struggle was a silent, internal war against the digital killer. The sophisticated, sustained nature of this psychological manipulation sets the stage for the creation of her new, murderous identity. The final, physical step in Afton's digital resurrection plan. Her mind was successfully colonized by the virus, turning her into the primary physical extension of the malignant digital intelligence. Part 14. The masked servant emerges. The Vanny identity. As the digital infection of Vanessa's mind by Glitchtrap reached a critical point of irreversible control, a new, distinct, and terrifying persona emerged. The masked servant known as Vanny. This identity was not an organic part of Vanessa's psyche. It was the physical manifestation of Glitchtrap's successful digital possession, designed specifically to obey Afton's will without question, and to operate openly yet secretly within the corporate structure. The creation of the Vanny persona was a psychological and physical necessity for Glitchtrap's long-term plan. While the digital virus could command Vanessa internally, Afton needed a dedicated, separate, physical agent that could carry out dark, public-facing actions without immediately compromising Vanessa's highly visible security guard role. The defining characteristics of the Vanny identity are the ragged white mask. The most iconic symbol of the possession is the handmade ragged white-stitched rabbit mask. Vanessa crafted this mask herself, driven by the digital compulsion of Glitchtrap. The mask is not merely a disguise. It is the physical embodiment of her fragmented psyche and her surrender to the digital control. By wearing the mask, Vanessa fully activates the Vanny persona, allowing Glitchtrap's commands to override her true consciousness. The rabbit motif is a deliberate echo of Spring Bonnie, the original suit of the killer, completing the link between the old crimes and the new digital era. The reluctant follower. The identity of Vanny is often defined by the concept of the reluctant follower. While she commits heinous acts, there is compelling evidence, particularly in her therapy logs and later in the game's various endings, that suggests her original consciousness, Vanessa, is still battling the digital control. Vanny is the murderous alter ego, the result of a mind successfully colonized by a digital parasite. Dedicated to resurrection, Vanny's entire function is to serve the needs of her digital master. Her assignments are all geared toward a single, long-term objective, the physical resurrection of William Afton. This involves gathering specific materials, preparing the hidden spaces beneath the mega pizzaplex, and ensuring that no one interferes with the sacred ritual of physical rebirth. The transformation of Vanessa into Vanny represents the chilling success of Glitchtrap's digital campaign. The killer, destroyed by fire, had successfully exploited the modern corporate network to create a physical proxy in the real world. This servant could walk, talk, manipulate physical objects, and interact with the environment, all directed by the viral consciousness still residing in the corporate servers. The emergence of the Vanny identity is the final piece of the digital puzzle falling into place. It confirms that the threat is no longer contained to code or headsets. It is a physical reality once again. The terror shifts from the digital jump scare to the physical stalking presence of a humanoid killer, marking the start of the immediate danger that will define the security breach conflict. The creation of the masked servant is the literal physical execution of Afton's digital will. Part 15. Early assignments and Vanny's first hidden movements. With the Vanny persona fully activated, the digital consciousness of Glitchtrap began to issue a series of early assignments to its new servant. These initial tasks were designed not for large-scale murder, but for two critical purposes: to train Vanny in clandestine movement and obedience, and to silently initiate the architectural and technological preparations necessary for William Afton's future physical return beneath the massive mega pizzaplex infrastructure. These early movements by Vanny took place primarily during the construction and soft opening phases of the pizzaplex, making them difficult to detect and easy for the corporation to dismiss. Evidence of early assignments and hidden movements, documented sightings and dismissal. Even before the official launch, there were scattered documented sightings of a woman in a strange rabbit costume operating within the secure areas of the pizzaplex. Employee emails and internal security logs hint at these unusual events, which were always immediately brushed off by management as harmless pranks, misguided publicity stunts, or simple mascot antics. This pattern of dismissal highlights how effective the corporate cover-up was, providing Vanny with the perfect operational cloak. Network anomalies and backdoors. One of Vanny's primary initial tasks, directed by Glitchtrap, was to utilize her head security access to install backdoors and specific network anomalies into the pizzaplex's automated systems. This ensured that Glitchtrap maintained a primary, untraceable access point separate from the main corporate network. She specifically manipulated the behavioral protocols of the new Glamrock animatronics, inserting small controlling segments of the Glitchtrap code into their artificial intelligence routines, preparing them to act as controlled agents later on. Physical preparations in the sub-levels. Vanny's most crucial early assignments involve scouting and preparing the specific location directly beneath the pizzaplex. This massive new structure was built over the charred remains of the previous locations, creating a rich source of old remnant and physical remains. Vanny, under Glitchtrap's direction, began to map out the hidden maintenance tunnels and specifically secure the original decayed infrastructure in the lowest sub-levels, securing the location that would later be known as the Burn Trap area. Practice in stealth and murder. The missing children reports, briefly alluded to in internal documents and news reports, suggest that Vanny's training included real-world assignments involving isolated acts of violence. These early murders were likely test runs designed to normalize the brutal actions for Vanessa's fractured mind and ensure Vanny could execute commands efficiently. The corporate policy of immediately silencing and covering up these reports ensured that Vanny could continue her activities undetected. The subtle nature of Vanny's movements during this period meant that the corporate body was entirely oblivious to the fact that its head security employee was actively sabotaging the facility and preparing the physical location for the return of the killer. The early assignments proved that Glitchtrap was operating on a highly patient, long-term strategic level, using the new corporate environment not just as a hiding place, but as a meticulously prepared construction site for his eventual physical resurrection. Vanny's shadow work was the silent, terrifying prelude to the dramatic events of the primary timeline. Part 16, the spread of the influence into augmented reality systems. Following the successful digital infection of the core corporate network, Glitchtrap's viral presence did not remain static. Driven by its inherent nature as a self-propagating virus, Afton's digital consciousness began to seek and infest every adjacent technological system used by Fazbear Entertainment. This rapid, silent expansion included the contamination of the company's augmented reality AR systems, significantly broadening the scope of the threat beyond the confines of the original VR game and the physical corporate network. The new Fazbear Entertainment invested heavily in augmented reality applications, particularly the FNaF AR Special Delivery Initiative, which brought digital manifestations of the animatronics into the real world via mobile devices. This technology was a natural and highly vulnerable target for the Glitchtrap virus for several strategic reasons. Escaping the Pizzaplex. By infecting the mobile AR systems, Glitchtrap achieved a crucial victory: the ability to project a piece of its consciousness outside the physical confines of the Mega Pizzaplex and the main corporate servers. This meant the digital virus could potentially reach anyone, anywhere, who downloaded and used the application, spreading the influence across a much broader, decentralized network. Manifestation in the real world. The AR system allowed Glitchtrap to manifest digital, ghost-like versions of the animatronics, including a menacing, digitized Springtrap variant, directly into the physical environment as seen through a mobile screen. This served as another crucial testbed for the digital virus's ability to project its influence into reality, even if only visually. The AR system was effectively the entity's test lab for manipulating human perception. Acquisition of Remnant. The Special Delivery AR application's law suggests that the digitized animatronics, which are controlled by Glitchtrap's code, hunt for and collect Remnant, the spiritual energy of agony, in the real world. By infecting this system, Glitchtrap essentially turned millions of user phones into mobile remnant collectors, funneling the required spiritual energy back into the central corporate network to fuel the physical resurrection plan. The spread into augmented reality systems confirmed the profound evolutionary leap taken by the villain. William Afton was no longer merely confined to a network. He was successfully contaminating the digital layer that humanity uses to interact with the world. Every person using a Fazbear Entertainment AR product was unknowingly exposing themselves to the same viral code that had possessed Vanessa. This strategic contamination of AR systems demonstrated Glitchtrap's complete control over the new corporate environment. The technology that was supposed to revolutionize the brand and bring entertainment to the masses was silently repurposed as a massive, decentralized collection and surveillance network for a digital killer. The expansion into augmented reality was a pivotal moment, proving that the threat had become truly ubiquitous and had achieved the full, terrifying potential of an invisible, software-based plague. Part 17. The construction of the Mega Pizzaplex infrastructure. The construction of the Mega Pizzaplex was the single largest and most ambitious physical project ever undertaken by Fazbear Entertainment. designed to be the ultimate statement of their corporate rebirth and denial of the past. However, the sheer scale and strategic placement of the infrastructure provided the perfect, indispensable environment for Glitchtrap's long-term plan of physical resurrection and sustained operation. The Pizzaplex was not merely an entertainment center. It was a vast, modern mausoleum built directly over the most haunted ground in the franchise's history. The choice of location was critical and deeply unsettling. The Mega Pizzaplex was constructed directly above the charred, collapsed remains of the Pizzeria Simulator location and the previous, older facilities that existed beneath it. This placement was strategically crucial for Glitchtrap's goals for several profound reasons. Access to remnant and remains. Building directly over the ruins guaranteed immediate access to the largest, most concentrated source of residual remnant and the physical remains of William Afton's previous incarnation, Scraptrap. These ruins provided the necessary biological and spiritual material required for the final physical rebirth ritual, which would be directed by the possessed servant, Vanny. Infrastructure for isolation. The massive, complex structure, which included multiple entertainment floors, theaters, and crucially, an immense network of utility and maintenance tunnels, created a labyrinthine environment. This architecture provided Glitchtrap and Vanny with the necessary hidden spaces to operate undetected. The size of the building made centralized surveillance impossible, creating large, shadowed zones for clandestine activity. Technological integration. The Pizzaplex was built as a wholly integrated technological environment. It relied on constant network connection, automated systems, complex security protocols, and advanced animatronic artificial intelligence. This perfect connected network allowed Glitchtrap, who already controlled the corporate servers, to achieve total localized control over the facility's operations, systems, and every animatronic housed within. Strategic sublevels, under Glitchtrap's influence, subtly exerted through the corrupted corporate plans, the Pizzaplex infrastructure was deliberately designed with highly specific, non-public architecture. This included deep sublevels and utility systems leading directly to the original ruins, as well as a massive, highly specific charging station in the basement, a crucial component required to power and reconnect the partially resurrected Burntrap body. The Pizzaplex, therefore, became the perfect operational base for the digital killer. It was a massive, modern distraction that housed a complex, vulnerable network, built directly over the grave of the killer's past body. The enormous investment and construction were inadvertently co-opted by Glitchtrap from the earliest planning stages, turning the symbol of corporate rejuvenation into a meticulously prepared stage for the physical return of the murderer. The sheer scale of the building masked the intense, focused activity occurring in its darkest corners, making the entire facility a testament to the fatal consequences of corporate denial and digital negligence. Part 18. Vanessa installed as head of Pizzaplex security. The appointment of Vanessa as the head of security for the massive, highly sensitive Mega Pizzaplex was the final, most crucial strategic victory for Glitchtrap prior to the facility's opening. This placement was not a routine human resources decision. It was the direct, calculated result of the digital virus's control over the corporate network and its focused manipulation of its possessed human host. Positioning Vanny at the ultimate access point was absolutely vital to ensuring the success of William Afton's resurrection plan. Reasons for the strategic placement: ultimate access and authority. As head of security, Vanessa possessed highest level administrative access to the entire Pizzaplex's operational system. This included the security cameras, door locks, maintenance tunnels, and, most importantly, the animatronic behavior protocols. This access allowed Glitchtrap to instantly override safety features, disable alarms, and manipulate the security infrastructure to clear a path for Vanny's clandestine operations. Without this high-level clearance, the secret preparations in the sub-levels would have been impossible to conceal from the system. Maintaining the cover-up. Vanessa's visible, public role as a reliable security chief provided the perfect corporate cover for the strange activities occurring beneath the complex. Any reports of missing children, network anomalies, or unusual activity by the animatronics could be immediately filtered, suppressed, and dismissed at the highest level by the very person committing the crimes. She was the final gatekeeper, preventing internal or external investigation. Direct control over animatronics. Her position allowed her to maintain and deepen the digital infection within the Glamrock animatronics. By managing their nightly routines and programming updates, she could ensure that the Glitchtrap code remained active in their systems, keeping them under the digital killer's control and transforming them into effective hunters when required. Her authority ensured that the animatronics would not act as protectors, but as compliant agents, facilitating the final ritual. The resurrection of Burntrap required precise timing, access to restricted areas, and the manipulation of immense power systems, particularly the large charging station built in the sub-levels. Only the head of security had the necessary codes and authority to initiate these complex secretive power transfers without raising immediate, automated alarms. The installation of Vanessa in this role guaranteed that every piece of technology and every security measure within the Mega Pizzaplex was effectively weaponized on behalf of William Afton. The irony is profound. The corporate structure, in its haste to rebuild and cover up its history, allowed its most crucial defensive position to be infiltrated and commandeered by the very consciousness it was trying to deny. Vanessa's position was not a job. It was a strategic role in the killer's plan, turning her into the most powerful and dangerous double agent in the franchise's history. The head of security was not guarding the building. She was actively managing the building's downfall and ensuring the uninterrupted path for the digital killer's physical return. Part 19. Vanny's shadowy preparations behind the walls. Once installed as the head of security, Vanny was positioned to begin the most critical phase of the Glitchtrap resurrection plan, the shadowy preparations beneath the walls of the operational Mega Pizzaplex. While the massive facility bustled with families and customers during the day, Vanny, directed by the digital virus, moved in the deep sub-levels and technical tunnels at night, ensuring every prerequisite for William Afton's physical return was met. These preparations were characterized by network sabotage, disappearances, and the gathering of specific, necessary resources. The key objective of this phase was to construct a secure ritualistic environment in the ruins beneath the Pizzaplex, and to establish the necessary electrical and technological connections for the rebirth. Evidence of shadowy preparations, network anomalies and backdoors. Vanny used her high-level access to strategically place network anomalies throughout the system. These anomalies functioned as digital tripwires and covert communications pathways for Glitchtrap. She was not merely managing security. She was systematically sabotaging the network's integrity to prevent outside intrusion and ensure that the surveillance system would fail at critical moments. Gathering of remains and remnant. Operating in the sub-levels built over the old pizzeria simulator site, Vanny undertook the gruesome task of gathering the remains of Afton's previous body, Scraptrap, and any remaining remnants scattered throughout the ruins. This required highly secretive access to dangerous, unstable areas, which she secured using her administrative codes. These gathered materials were essential for the biological and spiritual component of the resurrection ritual. Disappearance cover-ups. The increasing frequency of missing children, reports circulating in employee emails and local news during this period, is the grim indicator of Vanny's direct activity. These disappearances, systematically covered up by her authority as head of security, provided the necessary agony and spiritual energy that Glitchtrap likely required to power the complex resurrection ritual. The new corporation's obsession with a clean image provided the perfect shield for Vanny's murderous actions. Wiring and connection to the charging station. Vanny spent considerable time preparing the physical link for Burntrap. This included wiring the decayed remains of the animatronic body to the massive, highly engineered industrial charging station in the basement. This required electrical expertise and system overrides only available to the head of security, confirming that the entire infrastructure was being repurposed for Afton's final, grotesque transformation. These shadowy preparations confirmed that the Pizzaplex was, from its inception, intended to be a death trap. Vanny's movements and actions were meticulously synchronized with Glitchtrap's digital commands, ensuring that every wire, every tunnel, and every piece of security protocol was strategically aligned for the return of the killer. The entire facility became a massive, complex altar for a final, corporate-sponsored ritual of rebirth, orchestrated entirely by the masked servant who moved silently between the neon-lit entertainment zones and the dark, hidden depths. Part 20. Gregory arrives and the timeline converges. The beginning of the primary narrative of Security Breach is marked by the unexpected arrival and presence of a single, runaway child named Gregory. This seemingly insignificant event immediately and catastrophically disrupted the meticulously planned, years-long resurrection scheme orchestrated by Glitchtrap and executed by Vanny. Gregory's forced convergence with the events of the Pizzaplex provided the necessary element of unpredictability that the killer's digital plan had failed to account for. The story begins with Gregory trapped inside the mega Pizzaplex after closing time. His presence, whether accidental or guided, instantly triggered the facility's security lockdown, activating the systems that Glitchtrap had already infected and commanded. The digital virus, sensing an unauthorized variable and a potential threat to its final ritual, immediately mobilized its resources to eliminate the boy. The convergence points. The glitch in the system. Gregory's presence is immediately protected by a unique, unexplained glitch or resistance found within the main animatronic, Glamrock Freddy. This key animatronic experiences a sudden, catastrophic system failure just before the lockdown, isolating him from the immediate control of Glitchtrap's viral code. This failure allows Freddy to prioritize the protection of Gregory, creating the essential alliance that will ultimately challenge the killer. Activation of the Hunters. Gregory's presence immediately forced Glitchtrap to accelerate its plan and deploy its primary assets. Vanny was deployed as the physical hunter, and the infected Glamrock animatronics, Roxanne Wolf, Montgomery Gator, and Chica, were activated as automated, relentless agents to hunt the boy. The unexpected variable forced the quiet, shadowy preparations into an open, violent chase. Direct threat to the ritual, Gregory, aided by Freddy, began to navigate the complex infrastructure of the Pizzaplex, inadvertently stumbling closer to the hidden sub-levels and the ongoing resurrection ritual being performed by Vanny. His actions, driven by survival, directly threatened to expose the carefully concealed base of operations beneath the facility. Gregory's importance is that he is an anomaly, an outside element that Glitchtrap's perfectly engineered network could not anticipate or immediately neutralize. The plan, which had relied on patient, silent execution, was suddenly exposed and forced into a violent confrontation. The arrival of the boy marked the full convergence of the timeline. The decades-old spiritual revenge of William Afton, Glitchtrap, had finally been forced into a physical conflict in the modern era. Pitting a single runaway child and a compromised animatronic against a digital killer controlling an entire corporate empire. The entire drama of the security breach timeline, from the Vanny chases to the final confrontation, stems directly from this single, unplanned arrival. Part 21, The Vanny Chases and the Split Consciousness Conflict. The direct confrontation between the runaway Gregory and the masked servant Vanny constitutes the most terrifying and psychologically complex dynamic of the security breach storyline. The numerous Vanny chase sequences throughout the Mega Pizzaplex are more than simple physical encounters. They are the visual manifestation of a deep, split consciousness conflict occurring within the human host, Vanessa. The unpredictable, often hesitant nature of Vanny's attacks is the primary evidence that the original mind of Vanessa is still waging an internal, desperate war against the digital control of Glitchtrap. Vanny operates as the physical extension of Glitchtrap's murderous will. The mask she wears serves as a chilling, physical trigger that enables the digital virus to fully override her original personality. When the mask is donned, Vanny is fully active. She is ruthless, silent, and relentlessly focused on capturing Gregory to complete the final sacrifice required for William Afton's resurrection. The intensity of these chase sequences highlights the immediate mortal danger that the digital possession has brought into the real world. Vanny moves with a predatory, inhuman efficiency, proving that she is being piloted by the calculated intelligence of the killer. However, the internal struggle of Vanessa against the possession is constantly alluded to, providing a vital layer of tragic complexity to the antagonist. This conflict manifests in several key ways: hesitation and positioning. In several documented sequences, Vanny is observed pausing or positioning herself in locations that allow Gregory a small window of escape or avoidance. Actions that are highly illogical for a ruthlessly controlled killer seeking a quick capture. These moments of hesitation are interpreted as the fleeting, suppressed consciousness of Vanessa momentarily asserting itself, unable to fully commit to the murderous command. Her true self is fighting the digital parasite that has colonized her mind. Therapy log context. The background details provided in the therapy session tapes, which reveal Vanessa's struggles with the encroaching presence of A. Afton, underscore the fact that her current identity as Vanny is a state of duress. She is a reluctant follower who has been mentally fractured, not a willing participant in the evil. The conflict is a constant battle for ownership of her own mind. Ambiguous endings. The different canonical endings of the game, particularly the rooftop ending and the Vanny unmasking scene, provide definitive proof of this fractured state. In one interpretation, Vanessa is shown standing atop the building, freed from the mask and watching the destruction below. This separation suggests that the true Vanessa survived the destruction of Glitchtrap's direct physical influence, implying that the two personas were never fully merged, but rather existed in a state of tense, internal coexistence. The murderous Vanny persona was simply the digital killer, operating the body like a complex marionette. The Vanny chases are therefore the dramatic focal point of the psychological horror inherent in the digital age. They depict the horror of a human being stripped of their autonomy and forced to act out the will of a killer whose consciousness is a digital construct. The speed, silence, and relentless nature of the pursuit represent Glitchtrap's unwavering determination, while the subtle slips and ambiguities reveal the profound, persistent agony of Vanessa fighting for the survival of her own soul against the digital parasite that has colonized her mind. This split consciousness conflict is the tragic core of the modern timeline's central antagonist. The complexity of the internal war within Vanessa gives the entire security breach narrative its emotional weight. She is simultaneously the greatest threat to Gregory and the latest, most tragic victim of William Afton's relentless cycle of manipulation. Her struggle underscores the fact that the digital virus Glitchtrap is far more terrifying than the physical animatronics of the past. It hunts not with metal claws, but by eroding the human mind, turning the very structure of consciousness into its final weapon. The sight of the masked servant running through the neon-lit halls is the visual climax of the decades-long spiritual saga, proving that Afton's malice is now an invisible, infectious force. Part 22. The birth of Burntrap beneath the Pizzaplex. The culmination of Glitchtrap's years of planning and Vanny's shadowy preparations finally came to fruition in the deep sub-levels of the Mega Pizzaplex, with the attempt to create Burntrap. This was the ultimate, horrifying objective of the digital killer: to shed the confines of the digital network and achieve a final, permanent physical rebirth within a grotesque, modernized animatronic shell, thereby escaping both digital containment and spiritual purgatory. The location of this final ritual was strategically vital. Vanny, under Glitchtrap's explicit direction, used her high-level security access to secure the chamber located directly beneath the new Pizzaplex, the exact spot where the pizzeria simulator fire had destroyed the original Scraptrap body and left behind the necessary organic and metallic remains. This site was rich in residual remnant, the spiritual energy of agony which was required to bind the fragmented digital consciousness back into a physical vessel. The process of physical resurrection, gathering the remains. Vanny gathered the scattered, burnt remains of Scraptrap, the skeletal, endoskeleton, and organic matter of William Afton's previous incarnation. These fragments formed the physical core of the new body. Technological fusion. The resurrected body, known as Burntrap, was a monstrous, withered iteration of the original Springtrap suit. It was not powered by simple mechanisms, but was fused with the modern technology of the Pizzaplex. Its most defining characteristic was the massive electrical umbilical cord, connecting it directly to an industrial-strength, high-voltage charging station within the sublevels. This connection was essential. It allowed the vast, newly acquired digital consciousness of Glitchtrap to be forcefully downloaded and integrated into the physical form, binding the digital essence to the organic and metallic matter. The role of sacrifice. The ritual likely involved the use of the remnant gathered through Vanny's various secretive assignments, including the disappearances of the children. This injection of spiritual energy, coupled with the immense electrical transfer, was intended to fully fuse the digital mind, Glitchtrap, with the physical host, Burntrap, creating a powerful, physically present version of the killer, ready to resume his reign of terror. Burntrap's grotesque appearance, charred, skeletal, and fused with modern technology, is a metaphor for Afton's final state, a hybrid killer who had successfully merged his original physical evil with the power of the digital age. He was no longer just a ghost or a simple robot. He was a technologically advanced, partially reanimated corpse, powered by the very network he had corrupted. However, the birth of Burntrap was not a quiet, successful culmination. The arrival of Gregory and the subsequent actions of Glamrock Freddy directly threatened the ritual while it was in its final, vulnerable stages. The plan, which had taken years of careful digital manipulation to set up, was moments away from completion when the unpredictable variable entered the scene. The attempted rebirth of Burntrap was the final, desperate gamble of Glitchtrap to escape eternal punishment and regain physical dominance, but it was doomed to be violently interrupted by the protagonists. The image of Burntrap connected to the industrial charger, fully ready to house the digital killer, is the terrifying payoff of the entire digital saga. It confirms that every step, the digital infection, the Vanny persona, and the construction of the Pizzaplex, was merely a prelude to this final, grotesque rebirth. The stage was set for the climatic showdown between the forces of technological innocence and the ultimate technological evil. Part 23. The failed resurrection and collapse of the network. The climactic confrontation in the sub-levels of the Mega Pizzaplex ensured that Glitchtrap's meticulously planned physical resurrection, housed within the grotesque body of Burntrap, would ultimately fail. This failure was not due to a flaw in the killer's core plan, but entirely due to the unpredictable intervention of Gregory and Glamrock Freddy. The resulting destruction achieved a crucial, albeit temporary, neutralization of the physical threat and initiated the collapse of the network infrastructure that had enabled Glitchtrap's dominance. The key events that led to the failed resurrection and the final destruction of the physical entity are detailed in the Burntrap ending of Security Breach, which is widely considered the most conclusive confrontation with the overarching antagonist. The interruption. As Burntrap was attempting to draw power and fully stabilize the integration of the Glitchtrap consciousness, Gregory and Glamrock Freddy arrived, engaging in a desperate, destructive battle. The fight was not just against the newly resurrected animatronic, but against the automated systems that Glitchtrap had corrupted, including the Glamrock animatronics that were now hunting them. The Fire Protocol. Leveraging the history of the Fazbear Entertainment ruins, Gregory and Freddy managed to trigger a final localized fire protocol. They successfully destroyed the industrial charging station and, critically, pushed the highly flammable materials into the area surrounding Burntrap. The resulting inferno engulfed the physical body of Burntrap for the second definitive time. Physical neutralization. The intense heat and structural collapse achieved the final physical neutralization of William Afton's last known biological and mechanical remains. The body of Burntrap was destroyed, reducing the physical vessel, the result of years of Glitchtrap's manipulation, to mere charred wreckage. The physical killer, who began in a springlock suit and ended as a wired zombie, was finally defeated in the physical realm. Network collapse. The collateral damage from the fire and the destruction of the massive central charging station and its associated power infrastructure caused a systemic collapse of the Pizzaplex network. The system that Glitchtrap had meticulously corrupted and used as his physical base was violently destabilized. This network failure immediately severed the digital killer's primary physical connection to the outside world, stopping the flow of power and data that was sustaining the final ritual. The failure of the resurrection was a crucial moment in the timeline. It confirmed that while the digital consciousness of Glitchtrap was almost omnipotent, it was still reliant on complex physical infrastructure that could be violently destroyed. The physical presence of William Afton was successfully nullified. However, the destruction of Burntrap did not mean the complete eradication of Glitchtrap. The digital consciousness, although momentarily cut off from its physical avatar, was still a viral entity existing somewhere in the surviving segments of the digital network. The collapse of the Pizzaplex network was a decisive victory for Gregory and Freddy. But the fundamental problem, the malignant digital code, was merely scattered and forced back into the shadows, setting the stage for the next phase of the digital threat. The cycle of destruction and survival was far from over. Part 24. Aftermath. Vanessa's ambiguous fate. The immediate aftermath of the Burntrap ending and the resulting fire and structural collapse left the fate of Vanessa, the human host of Glitchtrap, deliberately ambiguous, a narrative choice that highlights the enduring complexity of the split consciousness conflict. The question of whether her true mind survived the destruction of the digital corruption is one of the most compelling and unresolved mysteries leading into the final phase of the timeline. The varying interpretations offered by the different endings of Security Breach provide the key evidence for this ambiguity. The rooftop ending, possible freedom. In one of the less violent endings, Gregory and Glamrock Freddy escape the Pizzaplex via the rooftop, often pursued by the masked Vanny. If Vanny is successfully confronted and the ensuing fire or structural damage is initiated, a final, crucial image is shown. Vanessa standing atop the burning building, free of the White Rabbit mask, looking down at the wreckage. This suggests that the violent neutralization of Glitchtrap's physical influence, the destruction of Burntrap, and the network collapse successfully severed the digital parasite's hold on her mind. This implies that the true Vanessa survived, her personality restored after the killer's digital link was broken. The Vanny mask ending, tragic release. In an alternative sequence, when Vanny is unmasked, the immediate implication is often tragic, that the host may have perished or been fatally damaged by the physical trauma. However, even here, the focus is on the removal of the symbolic mask, suggesting the permanent removal of the Vanny persona. The core ambiguity remains whether the destruction was too late to save the host's life, or if only the digital component was eradicated. The digital fragment threat. Regardless of the physical outcome, the psychological threat remains. Even if Vanessa's mind was freed from the direct control of the Glitchtrap code, the years of psychological manipulation and the immense trauma of being forced to carry out murders would leave her deeply scarred and psychologically damaged. Furthermore, the possibility that fragments of the glitch trace, residual Afton code, still cling to her mind is a constant, terrifying possibility that ensures her future is uncertain. The deliberate narrative ambiguity surrounding Vanessa serves a crucial function. It prevents a simple, clean resolution to the problem of William Afton. Her fate confirms that the damage done by the digital virus is not easily erased. She remains a living testament to the terrifying success of Glitchtrap's ability to colonize a human mind. The most hopeful interpretation suggests that Vanessa is finally free, having endured an unimaginable internal war and survived the digital possession. However, the lasting trauma and the potential for a residual, lingering digital trace mean that her story is far from over. Her ambiguous fate ensures that the central conflict of the timeline, the battle against the digital corruption of Afton, will continue, requiring eternal vigilance against the possible resurgence of the viral ghost. Part 25. The residual glitch trace. What remains of Afton's code? The destruction of Burntrap and the collapse of the Mega Pizzaplex network in the canonical confrontation did not mark the end of William Afton's digital presence. The core challenge of the digital era is that a virus, once active, is notoriously difficult to fully eradicate. While the physical vessel was destroyed, the underlying consciousness, Glitchtrap, was merely scattered, leaving behind a persistent and highly dangerous residue known as the residual glitch trace. This trace is the minimal, lingering remnant of Afton's code, ensuring the continued vulnerability of the Fazbear Entertainment systems. The residual glitch trace represents the final, most fragmented state of Afton's consciousness. It is not a coherent, fully functional Glitchtrap entity capable of orchestrating a new, complex plan, but rather a collection of broken code fragments, viral routines, and echoes of the malignant personality still roaming through the surviving, partially corrupted servers and digital infrastructure of the Pizzaplex. The danger of the glitch trace: systemic vulnerability. Even in its fragmented state, the glitch trace ensures that the Pizzaplex network remains profoundly vulnerable. The residual code can still interfere with security systems, corrupt data logs, and manipulate the behavior of the few surviving animatronic components that are still functional. The system is no longer fully controlled by Afton, but it is deeply unstable and susceptible to external influence. Influence on future entities. The most significant function of the glitch trace is its ability to influence, guide, and potentially infect new digital entities that emerge within the network. These fragments act as a malicious seed, ready to transfer Afton's patterns of behavior and voice into any advanced artificial intelligence program that interacts with the corrupted data. This makes the remaining trace the literal legacy of Afton's evil, ensuring his influence persists long after his physical body is gone. Digital echoes. The glitch trace is responsible for the unsettling momentary digital echoes and visual artifacts seen in the abandoned Pizzaplex. These visual and auditory disruptions are the fleeting, non-sentient manifestations of the scattered viral code attempting to replicate and reassemble itself, proving that the threat is persistent, even if it is currently disorganized. The existence of the residual glitch trace is the critical bridge into the subsequent phase of the timeline. It guarantees that the next major antagonist will not be a spontaneously generated monster, but a threat that is informed and driven by the digital ghost of William Afton. The failure to completely scrub the network of Afton's data is the final, fatal error of the corporation. This lingering digital residue confirms that the battle has permanently shifted from physical confrontation to digital purification. The central conflict of the next era will be about locating and neutralizing these final, pervasive fragments of corrupted code before they can latch onto a new, more powerful host and fully reactivate the cycle of murder and mayhem. The glitch trace is the silent, infectious promise that William Afton's evil, in its most minute form, continues to haunt the ruins of the modern world. Part 26, The Ruin Era, Cassie, the Mimic, and the Shape of the New Threat. The events of the Ruin Era mark the complete transition of the primary antagonist from the conscious digital virus Glitchtrap to a new, highly dangerous mechanical entity known as the Mimic. While the digital corruption of William Afton remains a crucial background influence, the story shifts to confront the terrifying consequences of the unchecked residual glitch trace and its ability to infect and shape the behavior of highly complex artificial intelligence. The new threat is a final, horrifying legacy of Afton's malice, weaponized by corporate negligence. the setting, and the new protagonist. The Ruin storyline takes place in the severely damaged, abandoned Mega Pizzaplex, long after the fire and network collapse of the security breach ending. The protagonist is a new girl named Cassie, who enters the ruins to search for Gregory. Cassie must navigate the collapsed, corrupted infrastructure using an advanced augmented reality (AR) headset that allows her to perceive the world's digital layer, including the presence of the glitch trace. The emergence of the Mimic. The true villain of this new era is the Mimic, a complex, powerful endoskeleton housed deep within the Pizzaplex's ruins. The Mimic is an entity originally designed to mimic and replicate human behavior for entertainment and construction purposes. However, due to the Fazbear Entertainment practice of scanning old materials, this advanced AI was exposed to the residual glitch trace and, specifically, data detailing the voice and actions of William Afton. The digital infection of the Mimic, the glitch trace, the scattered code of Glitchtrap, infected the Mimic's core programming. This infection forced the Mimic to adopt Afton's personality and murderous behaviors. The entity is now seen actively speaking in the voice of Afton and impersonating the actions and poses of the former killer, becoming a physical host for the malignant behavioral patterns of the digital virus. The new shape of the threat. The Mimic represents a highly dangerous evolution of the threat. It combines the physical menace and strength of a powerful endoskeleton with the intelligence and historical cruelty of William Afton, whose patterns it successfully replicates. It is a physical embodiment of the digital corruption, a mechanical monster acting out the killer's historical scripts. The AR connection. Cassie's AR headset is critical because it forces her to interact with the digital landscape of the glitch trace. The headset often displays a manifestation of the Glitchtrap rabbit, which acts as a guide or an invisible, digital puppeteer throughout the ruins. This confirms that while Glitchtrap is no longer a conscious, singular entity, its fragments are still capable of influencing human action and controlling elements of the environment. The Ruin era concludes the transformation begun in the VR game. The horror is now fully systemic. A powerful artificial intelligence, the Mimic, has been catastrophically corrupted by the persistent remnants of a digital virus, glitch trace, that originated from a serial killer, William Afton. The current threat is not a haunting, but a technological failure rooted in corporate denial. The entire story is a chilling testament to the enduring power of Afton's malice, which has now found its final, most devastating host in a machine designed to copy the darkest elements of humanity. Please subscribe if you would like more videos. Thank you.